Hi, I'm Chris Mark. Over the next 10 minutes, we are going to dive deep into a critical strategic briefing. We are examining adversary amplification and the frictionless battlefield, a concept that defines the modern state of unrestricted global conflict. Our objective is to move beyond the headlines and understand the actual infrastructure of influence that is reshaping our strategic environment. Over the past 30 years, I have consulted for governments, financial institutions, and Fortune 500 companies on the complex intersections of security, deterrence theory, and unrestricted warfare. Before my consulting career, I served as a United States Marine, a force reconnaissance operator, and a scout sniper, seeing combat in Somalia in 1994. I have been in conflict, and I have seen how its face has changed from the physical battlefield to the digital frictionless battlefield we face today. My research into the science of security and Chinese unrestricted warfare doctrine has led to a startling conclusion. The very digital tools meant to connect our society are being systematically weaponized against it. This isn't just about cyber attacks on our systems. It's about the deliberate exploitation of domestic populations to amplify adversarial narratives, turning our own people into unwitting participants in a global struggle for influence. I define adversary amplification as the process by which domestic actors, often without any awareness of adversarial origin or intent, voluntarily propagate narratives that advance the strategic objectives of a foreign power. This mechanism effectively transforms ordinary citizens into zero-cost weapons. It bypasses traditional military defenses by operating within the logic of our own open society, utilizing our freedoms to create strategic paralysis. To understand how to counter this threat, we must first understand the infrastructure that makes it possible. I am introducing a four-component model that structures this mechanism with military precision. Let's break down how this influence chain actually operates to bypass our collective immunity. Component one is the agent. This is the directing actor with strategic intent, be it a nation-state like China or Russia, a domestic political faction, or even a commercial interest. Crucially, the agent's requirement isn't manufacturing a grievance, but identifying an authentic grievance that already exists within the target population and ensuring narratives serving their interests enter the ecosystem. Component two is the node, the unwitting domestic amplifier. Sincerity is the mechanism's primary operational asset. Unlike a paid intelligence agent, the node genuinely and passionately believes the narrative they are sharing. This sincerity is the mechanism's most powerful feature, making the information nearly impossible to debunk using traditional logical arguments because the node's identity is now tied to the narrative.
Component three is the ecosystem, the commercial infrastructure of social media and algorithms that amplifies signal without needing direct adversarial oversight. This system was built to generate revenue through attention.
Because fear and outrage are more shareable and generate more engagement than nuance, the ecosystem's commercial incentives naturally align with adversarial objectives, providing a free accelerant for influence operations. Finally, component four is the impact. The ultimate strategic goal is almost never to make the population believe a specific lie, but rather to create a state of permanent cognitive exhaustion and institutional distrust. A population that distrusts every institution from the free press to the courts and the electoral system cannot form a coherent response to actual threats. The nation is rendered strategically inert and defeated from within by its own confusion. The historical record demonstrates that this mechanism operates with equal effectiveness across over a century of examples. It is not a new phenomenon, only the technology and the speed of the infrastructure have evolved. Let's examine three definitive case studies of state-directed amplification in action. History provides the blueprint for our social vulnerabilities. In 1898, the sinking of the United States ship Maine provided the perfect pretext for war with Spain. This was amplified by domestic newspaper publishers motivated by circulation revenue and sensationalism. They seeded a narrative of Spanish treachery that gripped the public mind through the power of sincere national outrage, forcing the government's hand and demonstrating that profit-driven ecosystems have always been vulnerable to amplification. It was an early victory for the amplification mechanism. During the Vietnam era, we saw this reach a massive scale. Declassified records reveal that the Soviet Union spent over $1 billion specifically to amplify domestic anti-war movements within the United States. That figure actually exceeded what they spent on direct military support for the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army combined. They didn't invent the sentiment, they identified a sincere grievance and used their resources to scale it into a national crisis that paralyzed American decision-making. Sincerity was their ultimate force multiplier. The Iraq War WMD campaign is a definitive modern example of how the mechanism can even infect the state itself. Here, the primary asset was authentic post-9/11 fear. When an adversary seeded raw material and faulty intelligence, domestic actors, including politicians and segments of the media, then amplified it with complete sincerity. It demonstrates that when a population is primed by fear, the node can be anyone, and the impact can be a multi-decade strategic commitment built on an amplified narrative. Trust was weaponized against us. To understand why these operations have such devastating velocity today, we must recognize how the architecture of trust has been dismantled. We have moved from a model of centralized information managed by institutional gatekeepers to an engagement economy that has completely demolished traditional barriers to entry. Every smartphone is now a potential node in an adversary's network, and the speed of transmission now outpaces our collective capacity for verification. The gatekeepers are gone. The statistics are staggering. Social media is now the primary news source for over a third of all adults, skyrocketing from just 4% only a decade ago. In this environment, nuance is traded for speed. Information that survives the algorithmic gatekeeping carries an implicit but unverified certification of truth simply because it is visible. This shift has created an environment where narratives can be seeded and scaled globally in minutes, rather than years. Speed is the enemy of accuracy. Now, every existing vulnerability in our social fabric is being compounded by the arrival of artificial intelligence. AI is the ultimate force multiplier for adversary amplification, reducing the cost of content production to near zero, while increasing its reach and velocity exponentially. We are entering the age of automated strategic influence. AI systems generate authoritative-sounding content on virtually any subject with absolute confidence. This confidence is an emergent property of the technology, not its accuracy. We saw this in 2026, when AI assistants helped spread the myth that the Lone Star tick was a new government creation. Despite being formally described by scientists in 1758, the AI-driven narrative was so well formatted that it became an overnight sensation, displacing historical reality with a synthetic alternative. AI makes the lie indistinguishable from the truth. Consider the anti-fracking campaigns of the 2010s. As American energy production surged, it directly threatened the revenue that makes up 40% of the Russian government budget. In response, they launched a documented amplification operation. They didn't need to pay for protesters. They simply fed existing environmental concerns, ensuring American production was slowed by its own internal political friction. They used our sincere concerns to protect their own sovereign revenue. This is strategic amplification at its most effective. Today, we see the same strategy targeting artificial intelligence. China publicly warns of the environmental dangers and energy costs of American AI infrastructure. Yet, while their amplified proxies feed local opposition in the U.S., the Chinese government is simultaneously subsidizing its own massive data center expansion at 100% state funding. It is a textbook case of strategic hypocrisy, utilizing our own ethical debates to slow our progress while they sprint toward dominance without internal friction. They are weaponizing our caution to win the AI race.
Mature operations now achieve scale by cross-contaminating issues. They embed claims within a larger web of reinforcing beliefs, linking things like 5G, vaccines, and climate change into a single structure.
This ensures that even if one claim is debunked, the overall narrative remains intact. This is what we see in the concept of intersectionality, where narratives are woven together to increase their resilience against correction. The network is self-healing. Recognizing this pattern is the first requirement of any effective response. I have developed a diagnostic framework based on 5 characteristics that are consistently present in these influence operations. We must learn to see the mechanism to defeat it. Let's examine the primary diagnostics. Every successful operation is built on an authentic grievance substrate. The agent identifies real concerns to provide initial credibility. This is then combined with strategic asymmetry. The agent benefits from the narrative success abroad, while being completely immunized against the same costs at home. When domestic behavior contradicts international messaging, that messaging is clearly an operational weapon. Asymmetry is the ultimate diagnostic. Addressing the node requires epistemic humility. We must accept the truth that an emotionally resonant post is not more likely to be true. It is far more likely to have been engineered to feel that way. Recognition of this engineering is the first step toward our national defense. We must prioritize information accuracy over the intensity of our feelings. This is the new discipline of the modern citizen in a frictionless battlefield. Our discernment is our defense. I am Chris Mark. Thank you for listening to the Strategic Briefing. My book, The War God's Face Has Become Indistinct, which examines these unrestricted warfare doctrines in depth, is available now at the link below. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and let's bridge the gaps in global risk together. Together, we can name the mechanism and protect the integrity of our society. Thank you for your time.